To begin making your pinch pot, you'll want to take some moist clay, and I'm going to cut off a section of this moist clay because this large chunk is much too large to work with for a small pinch pot. Then I'm going to start kneading or wedging this clay on my table. The wedging process will make the clay ready to form into whatever shape or form you're going to work with. In this case here, I'm trying to expel any extra air bubbles and try and mix together the wetter clay with the drier clay. Once I've wedged it a bit, I'm going to start throwing it into my palm here and really working it into a sphere. Once I've got it into a sphere, I'm going to take my thumb and find the center and press my thumb into the clay and begin to work my thumb against my fingers, pressing together to start forming the sides of the pot. I'm going to work the pot around in circles, and I'm going to press, press, press till I can get two thumbs in there, and then I'll work two thumbs pressing together and stretching out that clay. I'm paying close attention to the bottom of the pot instead of the top as I pull the pot gently outwards at the same time. I want to stay away from that top lip or the top rim because I don't want it to crack or get too thin or break. At this point, I'm going to tap it gently on the table to sort of flatten out the bottom just a little bit because I want to work with it on the table, just rotating it now as I continue to flatten out, or to thin out rather, the sides of the pot. I want the walls of the pot to be the same thickness all throughout. I'm going to begin pulling up the sides because I think I was working it a little bit too thin and the walls were going out too far. So I'm bending them back up a little bit more horizontal, a little bit more vertical. I'm going to turn my attention now to the top lip and start smoothing this out. Just trying to get rid of the largest imperfections. I don't have to do a ton to this right now because once the pot starts sitting up and getting a little bit stiffer, it will be much easier to get out the imperfections once the clay is a little bit harder. Alright, at this point I'm going to move the pot aside because I want to take a little bit of clay and begin to work it into the feet. I'll take some and I'm going to roll it into a coil, and then I'm going to cut it into little sections that I will then roll into little balls that I can put on the bottom to be the feet. So if you have a fettling knife will work fine for cutting. If you don't have a fettling knife, you can use a paper clip bent into a shape that will work for just slicing right through. Alright, so I'm going to set those 3 feet aside so they can start to stiffen up a little bit. But I may not want to use spheres or little balls for feet, so I'm going to just flatten out a little piece of clay into a pancake shape, and I think I'm going to cut some triangles. Gently remove them from the table and move them over to where my spheres are so they can start drying out. Now I can just play the waiting game, and I can let this sit out and dry a bit, or I can take a blow dryer and work on it with the blow dryer. So I can gently work the sides. Blow dryer is fine if you're really in a hurry, but honestly, just letting your pot sit out is the best way to do it. Once I think it's just about leather hard, I'm going to start working it again and smoothing out some of these areas that I didn't really address while it was plastic or wetter. Your hands, your fingers are really your best tool, so I'm working on smoothing it down, working out all those imperfections. So I was getting my sponge wet because I was thinking about using it, but I changed my mind. Not quite ready for it yet, so I'm going to wait. So I'm using the blow dryer a little bit more because I feel like it's still not as stiff as I want it to be in order to go on to the next stage. I could just let it sit out. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of water in this little bench pot I have already made, and I'm preparing to work on this lip now. I just want to get that sponge just a little bit damp and work some of the surfaces that I really wasn't able to get to in the early stages because the clay was too wet. But now I can use this sponge to help smooth things down. But you have to keep in mind that if you moisten your sponge too much, you're just going to take a step backwards because that moisture is going to transfer to the clay and you'll be back at the same initial step you were before when the clay was too wet. Alright, so I'm going to just blow dry the top a bit, or you can let it sit out to help stiffen up. I want to get it stiff enough to where I'm comfortable turning it over. Alright, so I'm ready at this point to start putting on the feet. And if you're working from home, you may have a fork. I've also used a serrated metal rib. Whatever you want to do to score the surface of your clay so that it is ready to take slip or water to join the pieces together. So I just want to clean up these feet because I think I'm going to use the triangular pieces for feet instead of the spheres. So just need to clean these up. Alright, so getting closer to being finished here. Alright, so I'm going to start assembling my slip, a serrated metal rib, maybe a smooth metal rib, and you see I have my fork ready to go and a wooden modeling tool. So I'm just making some finishing touches before I begin to attach my feet. So when I'm at school or working in the studio, I like to use my serrated metal rib to attach pieces. And you can see here that I've definitely decided to use the triangles, but I'm not sure how they're going to go. I think I'll just stick them up on their long end like this. So I'll set them aside. I'm going to scratch up or score that foot to prepare it to join together to the pot. If you're at home, a fork will do just as well. So if I'm at school, I'm going to use my slip, but if I'm at home, I'm going to use the water. Take a little bit of the slip, put it on my foot, and then I'm also going to put it on the pot. And I kind of rock it into place, make sure it's pressed in really firmly. I want to make sure it attaches well. I don't want it coming off either in the kiln or after it's been fired. Just to ensure that I have a really good fit, I can roll a teeny tiny coil just for reinforcement. It's not always necessary, but sometimes I like to do it just to be sure. Again, you don't have to work it too much because you can always go back it later once it's harder and use a sponge. This time I'm using a little bit of water. Place it on there nicely, work it in, make sure it is attached well. You can see I'm really pressing it on there. And this is where it helps to make sure that your clay is definitely leather hard, because if your clay is too plastic at this point, you will just undo all that hard work you did to make sure it's nice and smooth and it is the shape you want it to be. So again, I'm just making an itty bitty little coil and placing it around the foot, and I'm going to use my wooden modeling tool to really press it in. And I'm going to work on the last foot, do the same thing. Take a little bit of time to clean it up. You can flip it over, test it, make sure it's doing what I want it to do. Make any adjustments that are needed. And uh-oh. Take care of that little crack that I created because I was a little bit too rough with it. So work that clay back together. No worries. Alright, now I'm going to figure out what kind of texture I'm going to make, and I'm just going to use my fork because I want you to see that you probably already have really cool tools at home that will make a great texture for you. Sometimes the simple things turn out to work really, really well. As I'm pressing from the outside, I'm also supporting from the inside. And I think I want just a tiny bit more texture, so I think I'm just going to use this wooden modeling tool and go in from the other direction. Alright, so that's the basic steps. Got a little bit of cleaning up to do here and there and smoothing. Once it stiffens up even more, I'll be able to smooth it again. And as I'm looking at it now, it looks like I really could have worked on the feet a little bit more to make sure the placement was correct. But I think it's okay for now. I'm going to put the year. This is COVID year 2020.